Choi Yeonseung's eyes widened in surprise. What is this? Choi Yeonseung received the Great Warrior's Barrier. The Great Warrior's Barrier can withstand the abyss's storm and grant power to the servants, and this skill can be passed on to future generations. The goddess of defeat and laziness said, "It's really amazing," to which Choi Yeonseung curiously asked, "Is this thing reliable?" The goddess nodded, "Yes, this barrier is truly effective in the abyss. You can protect the area around you even when there are no constellations around. This is really good news for my successor, who is always busy and disappearing behind the constellations on Earth." Hearing this, Choi Yeonseung's face darkened as he thought to himself, "I feel like she's mocking me. But anyway, I'm happy that this is a good item." At Dragon Wong's mansion, Choi Yeonseung looked at the chart and said, "Look at how much the core prices have increased," but Dragon Wong, not at all happy, said, "This is great, but there's something more serious. My stock price, it has skyrocketed because of that stupid formless comprehender." Choi Yeonseung calmly said, "I'm not sure if this will comfort you, but that formless comprehender is paying the price for what he did after being defeated by the other constellations, really. I feel a bit better after hearing that." Choi Yeonseung thought to himself, "Well, that's because we're using it to attack the crown collector, so I'm helping him out." Then he went back to discuss it with the Cat of Lava and Magma and the Constellation of Dreams and Ambitions. The Cat of Lava and Magma was shocked and asked, "Are you hoping I'll spread those rumors?" Choi Yeonseung nodded, "Yes. The surprise attack on the core factory not only harmed the good constellations, but it also hurt the demonic constellations. So, if there's a rumor that the Constellation Collector is behind the formless comprehender, his position will surely be shaken." She responded, "I see, that sounds like a good plan," but Cat of Lava and Magma, in anger, asked why Choi Yeonseung insisted on spreading the rumor. Choi Yeonseung continued, "That's because you're good at gossiping." Cat of Lava and Magma didn't deny it. "Fine, I'll leave it to you." At this point, Choi Yeonseung thought to himself, thanks to this, the Crown Collector will be in more trouble than the formless comprehender was at the time. The next day, urgent news was spreading in the media. Recently, a rank hunter Joseph Grant announced that he would raid the Abyss Gate. This made Dragon Wong restless. He jumped up and shouted, "What? What is that madman talking about? Let's hear what he has to say." At this moment, in the press conference hall, Joseph Grant spoke to the media. "Until now, humanity has been under the control of the constellations in the Abyss, and we've been constantly attacked by monsters. The cause of all this damage is the Abyss Gate, because we've been afraid all this time. We've always turned our backs on the truth, but although it might be a bit late, now, I want to fulfill my duty as an A-rank hunter. In this press conference, I, Joseph Grant, declare that I will attack the Abyss Gate. Of course, I can't do this alone, that's why I need the help of more hunters. I, along with other A-rank hunters and above, will take on the fight, while the remaining hunters will support us. So, if you consider yourself a responsible hunter, regardless of your rank, as long as you're a hunter, join us. Let's take back our land together." Joseph Grant's speech garnered enthusiastic support from the public. Even Choi Yeonseung had to admit, that guy is really enthusiastic. Dragon Wong, on the other hand, was openly disdainful. "Enthusiastic, my foot. Did you know I've never even considered doing something like this?" Choi Yeonseung asked casually, "Is there a problem?" "Yes, everything is a problem. You'll have massive fees to deal with, you'll need to hire civil engineers to install basic facilities in the abyss and security to guard them. There are tons of issues here. But the bigger problem is that Joseph Grant isn't the type to care about civilians or low-ranking hunters. In fact, he's the kind who'd use them as bait for his target. We should never get involved in what he's doing." As soon as he turned around, Choi Yeonseung's eyes were glowing. Dragon Wong looked puzzled. "What's with your eyes? You're going to do whatever you want again, aren't you?" Choi Yeonseung stood up, stretching as he said, "Unfortunately, Joseph has a terrible personality, but it would be better if he succeeds, yes, but..." Choi Yeonseung reassured him, "Don't worry, I'll keep an eye on him if he does anything stupid. My company will definitely be fine if you do that." "And aren't you curious?" Dragon Wong asked. "About what?" Choi Yeonseung responded, "If what you're saying is true, then Joseph is someone who always acts in his own interest. If he decided to go in there, it means he's very confident, right? Maybe, is there a reason he's so confident?" He noticed their bodies were radiating a strong energy, they stood up. All right. Let's help the boss clean up around here. Looking at the latest bulletin about the announcement from an A-rank hunter, Joseph Grant will go down in history. Let's reclaim our territory. The goddess of defeat and laziness said, "It's really amazing," to which Choi Yeonseung curiously asked, "Is this thing reliable?" The goddess nodded, "Yes, this barrier is truly effective in the abyss. You can protect the area around you even when there are no constellations around. This is really good news for my successor, who is always busy and disappearing behind the constellations on Earth." At that moment, Alex was sitting at the table with Joseph Grant. "It seems like you're dominating the press," Alex said. Joseph Grant replied, "Thanks for the compliment." Alex continued, "But it seems like some countries aren't happy with you being the commander." Joseph Grant calmly replied, "That's not an issue because I don't intend to command foreign hunters. I just need them to participate in the raid and distract the enemy while they do that. My master, the Blood Iron General, and I will carry out our plan." A dungeon raid plan that a Constellation once mentioned. Alex chuckled, "There's no reason an investor wouldn't invest in it." In return, if any loot appears during the battle, Joseph Grant interrupted, "My master has promised that he will share everything with me." Good. Then he called Jacob and assigned him, "I want you to support them during this time." Jacob was thrilled to hear this. "Yes, father, leave it to me." Seeing his son's enthusiasm, Alex reminded him lightly, "Don't think of this as a simple raid. It will become a battle that endures through time, remember that. While you do that, I'll think about what to do with that land and plan for it gradually." Hearing this, Joseph Grant fell silent, lost in thought. Scene shifts to the Abyssal Gate, headquarters. A few days later, the hunters arrived here in great numbers. Choi Yeonseung spoke up, "I won't abandon you all when taking you along, but are you really okay with this? You could be in danger." However, the Hwa Mountain clan hunters had no regrets and resolutely followed. "No problem, wherever you go, we will always follow you without hesitation. We will always follow you." Seeing them so enthusiastic, Choi Yeonseung smiled and said, "All right then, let's enter as a small group of elite hunters, let's go." Then Choi Yeonseung and the Hwa Mountain clan also entered the Abyssal Gate, arriving at the first territory of the Abyss. Hunter Choi Yeonseung and the Hwa Mountain clan's members operated a few things on their tablets, saying, "I've successfully verified the identity. You can enter immediately." Choi Yeonseung replied, "Thank you." As he stepped in, the surroundings change. The system announced, "You have entered the first realm of the Abyss. The rewards of the realm are not displayed. The maximum number of participants is not shown, and the remaining time is not indicated." He looked up and said, "This is the territory of the first Abyss." In front of them was an area resembling a factory site. Everyone appeared worried. Choi Yeonseung reassured them, "Don't worry too much, because you have trusted and followed me to this place. I will do everything in my power to protect you." Those following him were moved by his words and exclaimed, "Hunter Choi Yeonseung. Well then, look over there." He pointed towards a building. "Do you see that building? That is the headquarters of the Dragon Industries." Choi Yeonseung cracked his knuckles, eyes blazing with determination. "All Hwa Mountain disciples, move into the training room of that building. I will personally teach you." However, those behind him were sweating profusely, and a girl immediately asked, "Now, right?" At the headquarters of the American expedition team, the staff were operating computers, and at the center of the room, Joseph Grant was sitting there, flanked by two guards who appeared to be assistants, one in armor and the other in a shirt. The armored person turned and asked, "Joseph, our people are asking when the raid will begin." Joseph replied, "Tell them to wait, it's not time yet." "What do you mean, not time yet?" He replied that there were more exploration teams here than he had anticipated, meaning there would be more people rejecting his control. "It would be better if we let those people do what they want, that way, they would clear out the orc forts in our sight for us. Once all the obstacles are out of the way, we will mobilize." Well, he watched the video and I think it won't be long before that happens. At the Dragon Industrial Headquarters, Choi Yeonseung was deep in thought, staring ahead. In front of him was a large screen displaying images of the building. He said, "The foreign hunters are performing better than I expected," to which Elizabeth asked, "Is it really okay if we just keep sitting idly? Who knows, there might be useful items there, right?" Whitaker agreed with Elizabeth, saying that it would be too late if others took all the items before us. He continued to stare at the large screen and said, "Even though this is the Abyss's territory, I still don't think the orc forts will have anything useful. Let's keep monitoring the situation a bit longer. There's something I'm waiting for," he said, and Smallwood asked, "Hey, buddy, there's really a plan, right?" "Yeah, that's right, but it's not a plan I came up with." Choi Yeonseung recalled the meeting at Dragon Wong's office. "Choi Yeonseung, we only have one plan. Observe what Joseph is secretly doing and then use that secret to put him at a disadvantage." Choi Yeonseung agreed, "Yeah, I also think it's a good idea, although it's a bit petty, but from that, we can minimize the damage to ourselves as much as possible. It is still quite petty, though." Dragon Wong looked at him and said slowly, "Choi Yeonseung, you don't have to say it that way." Back in the present, Choi Yeonseung said, "Whatever we say, it's still best to wait. And if you hear any news about the Korean exploration team, let me know." Suddenly, a red alert appeared on the screen. Everyone was surprised by the number of red alerts filling the screen. Elizabeth asked Choi Yeonseung, "What is this, sea monsters?" He replied, "Maybe so." Suddenly, Elizabeth noticed something and exclaimed, "Wait a minute. I don't think that's all. What's with that huge number? What's certain is that we can't sit still any longer. Everyone, prepare to go out and fight," Choi Yeonseung said as he turned and left, ignoring Elizabeth calling his name. Choi Yeonseung simply said, "In situations like this, we should help each other." Outside, a horde of monsters surged like a tidal wave. All of them were very fierce orcs. The building guards saw the wave of monsters, and one person hesitated, asking, wait, should we retreat?" "Don't fall back," a voice from behind made them stop. "Everything is as expected, maintain formation, don't panic." The commander said, "First, deploy protective magic. If they get in here, they will completely destroy our base." The commander thought to himself, although this is indeed within expectations. But isn't that too many? What can we do in this situation? At this moment, Choi Yeonseung gave the order, and the Hwa Mountain faction would hold their formation and wait for further instructions. They were only numerous, not many were strong enough to break through the defenses and get inside. Choi Yeonseung approached, followed by the Hwa Mountain faction members. Choi Yeonseung confidently said, "I will personally eliminate their leader right now," and everyone responded in unison, "Understood." The commander anxiously asked him, "What are you doing? If you also want to fight, then join the formation." Choi Yeonseung placed his hand on the commander's shoulder and said, "No need, don't stop using magic. It'll be faster if I go alone." "What are you saying?" the commander asked again, still bewildered. But Choi Yeonseung had already dashed out with incredible speed. He looked at Choi Yeonseung and exclaimed, "This is insane." Choi Yeonseung knew that the longer this dragged on, the worse it would be. The monsters unexpectedly stared ahead. Choi Yeonseung charged into the horde of monsters, causing explosions around him that sent monster corpses flying. Choi Yeonseung shouted, "All right, tell me, where is your leader?" The enemies opposite him were fierce and ready to attack Choi Yeonseung. Choi Yeonseung remained calm, thinking, "I should deal with these minions first." Choi Yeonseung issued a divine command. The energy spread out, and soon there were barely any left. Seeing someone not paying attention, Choi Yeonseung reminded him, "You were looking elsewhere during the fight, weren't you? You could die for that." And then, that person was knocked out by one of Choi Yeonseung's strikes. Choi Yeonseung felt a surge of excitement and said, "All right, I will keep doing this, attacking and cornering them." One by one, the enemies fell to Choi Yeonseung's attacks. Choi Yeonseung soared into the air, thinking he needed to find their leader. Announcement. The Blood and Frenzy Warrior, impressed with how you overwhelmed his troops. Choi Yeonseung was astonished when he read this. What? The Blood and Frenzy Warrior? Choi Yeonseung realized this was his territory. The goddess of failure and laziness had vaguely predicted this, but didn't expect him to state it outright. Choi Yeonseung, while punching someone, thought, "This guy doesn't seem quite normal," as a person struck by his attack screamed in pain. Suddenly, a gigantic scythe came crashing down on Choi Yeonseung. Choi Yeonseung deftly evaded the attack. Choi Yeonseung saw the one who was trying to kill him and faced him, saying, "From your size, I can guess you must be the leader, right?" The figure had white eyes with red rims and no black pupils. His sharp fangs made him look even more bloodthirsty. He growled, "Kill, invader, human." He raised his weapon high and shouted, "I will kill you." Choi Yeonseung taunted him, impressive vitality. A strong gust of wind blew past him. His neck was now under Choi Yeonseung's sword. Choi Yeonseung calmly said to him, "But unfortunately, that's the only thing worth praising about you." Decisive, swift, and powerful were three words that described Choi Yeonseung at this moment. To Choi Yeonseung, it seemed like he was the most terrifying being in the world and a formidable opponent for the monsters. The head of the largest orc fell off and rolled around. Naturally, seeing this horrifying truth, the others were terrified. They all shouted in unison, "The leader has been eliminated, run away." Choi Yeonseung stood with his sword, feeling lost. I think this is enough. I've done quite a lot." Then Choi Yeonseung left, leaving behind a pile of dead orcs. As Choi Yeonseung walked away, he thought of his teammates. They should be able to handle the rest, right? Choi Yeonseung silently mused, "If that's the case, I'll see how things are over there." That was under the flag of the Korean nation. The buildings and high-rises were completely engulfed in smoke and flames, and the bloodthirsty, foolish orcs. The warriors were working hard to save their world. 1 enemy against 3, they were skilled and brave warriors. This impressive and formidable-looking guy was one of the members of the Korean A-rank hunter exploration team, Choi Yeonseung. Choi Yeonseung had just defeated a pack of ferocious monsters, wiping the sweat off his brow and muttering to himself, "Damn, I probably killed at least 100 of these things, and I still haven't had a moment to rest." Suddenly, an ugly, rough foot approached Choi Yeonseung and attacked him from behind. But fortunately, with his quick reflexes and sharp instincts, Choi Yeonseung managed to dodge and deliver a blow to the creature. Choi Yeonseung guessed that this one was stronger than the others. It must be the leader. It was several times larger than Choi Yeonseung and was muttering, "Kill the human." The creature seemed agitated and suddenly roared, raising its weapon high, "I'll kill you." Choi Yeonseung suddenly noticed something, and his gaze hardened. Someone had attacked the monster from behind, causing it to be caught off guard and stabbed. It panicked and thought, "What's happening?" It only managed to let out a scream before collapsing to the ground. Choi Yeonseung braced himself and said to Choi Yeonseung, "I'm glad I didn't arrive too late." Choi Yeonseung stared at Choi Yeonseung in surprise. "Hunter Choi Yeonseung?" Choi Yeonseung was momentarily overjoyed and incredulous. "Is this an A-rank hunter? You came here to help us?" Choi Yeonseung didn't think it was a big deal, casually replying, "Do you think I came here just to play?" Then, Choi Yeonseung looked towards the direction where the monsters were gathering and said to Choi Yeonseung, "Stop talking nonsense and let's finish off these monsters first. Since I've already killed their leader, cleaning up shouldn't be too difficult." Hearing this from Choi Yeonseung, Choi Yeonseung didn't dare argue further and just nodded in agreement. He took a few steps forward and shouted to his fighting comrades, "Everyone listen up. Hunter Choi Yeonseung has defeated the orc leader. Let's take advantage of this and push back all of them." His teammates jumped up in joy upon hearing this. The monsters on this side, like those on the other side, were also defeated by the hunters within a few hours. Choi Yeonseung sighed in relief. "Well, it looks like this side is done too." Choi Yeonseung, who had just run over, bent down and said to Choi Yeonseung, "Thank you. I can't believe you came all the way to help us." Choi Yeonseung didn't consider his actions to be anything grand, responding calmly, "Well, it's no big deal, we should help each other out." Choi Yeonseung also started a conversation with Choi Yeonseung. "By the way, aren't you Hunter Choi Yeonseung?" Choi Yeonseung looked up in surprise and asked, "You know me?" Choi Yeonseung recalled something and said, "Yes, aren't you from the South Korean representative team at SSL? I remember seeing you fighting with Chong Shik. You always seemed to be taking hits." Choi Yeonseung continued, "By the way, your base seems to have suffered significant damage. Are you guys okay?" He scratched his head and chuckled awkwardly, "Ah, yes, it's nothing to worry about at this level. Our technicians will." He hadn't finished when someone from afar shouted, "Hunter Choi Yeonseung, there's a big problem." Choi Yeonseung turned around and asked the person, "A big problem? Have you found the orcs' hideout?" The person, panting heavily, said, "No," and then whispered something into his ear. Choi Yeonseung looked somewhat startled and said, "What? Say that again, this doesn't make any sense." The alarming news they received was that the abyssal gate connecting to Earth had been completely blocked. The people there had gathered at one spot, which was where the abyssal gate connected to Earth. However, Choi Yeonseung tried to touch it but was pulled back by a force. Choi Yeonseung held onto his arm that had been yanked back and said, "It really has been blocked. How could this happen?" Kwon Young-sung, standing beside him, wiped his sweat and said, "Yes, it really is like that." He patiently explained to Choi Yeonseung, "It seems that when our base was attacked, some orc mages sneaked in and used various tricks. We suspect that their sudden ambush was a diversion." Choi Yeonseung, pondering with a thoughtful expression, said, I didn't expect them to use magic to block the gate. Is that even possible?" The goddess of failure and laziness appeared and said, "It is possible, if it's just temporary. Some types of magic can block the gate for a relatively long time, especially at that level of magic." Choi Yeonseung has his own thoughts. Choi Yeonseung guesses that the bloodthirsty and mad warrior has something to do with this. The goddess, after hearing Choi Yeonseung, continued, "We can consider it that way then." Choi Yeonseung kept analyzing because Choi Yeonseung believed things would be much more complicated than he thought. Choi Yeonseung thought that warrior was just a madman craving for battle. To think he could use a bit of trickery. Or what if Choi Yeonseung used his strength to get through? The goddess, uncertain, said, "I can't guarantee we won't encounter unforeseen circumstances if you do that. Instead, defeating the magician or luring the warrior out of this territory would be the better option." Choi Yeonseung turned away. No longer looking at the goddess, Choi Yeonseung clicked his tongue and said, "It's easy for you to say." Choi Yeonseung ended the conversation with the goddess, turning to Kwon Young-sung, who was standing nearby, saying, "I'll head back to the base now, and after everything is handled, we can discuss and share more details." Kwon Young-sung, who trusted Choi Yeonseung, responded, "Ah, okay, thanks." Heading to another place, which was the dragon's industrial base. Elizabeth seemed to be triggered by something. She said loudly, "What, is the gate blocked?" It turns out Choi Yeonseung had informed her of this. Choi Yeonseung calmly put his hands on his hips and said, "It seems so." Elizabeth thought Choi Yeonseung was too calm, and she a bit irritably said, "This is not a small matter. What about our current resource stockpile?" She seemed so agitated that she kept going. "We have both hunters and technicians. Too many people need us to support them." Choi Yeonseung calmly and gently replied to Elizabeth, who was very anxious in front of him, "Oh, don't worry about that." Choi Yeonseung reassured her, "As the leader, I am responsible for everyone. I won't let my teammates starve." From his own space, Choi Yeonseung took out a pile of various items. The people there were shocked. They frantically asked, "What is this? Why is there a mountain of supplies here?" Elizabeth was in shock after shock. She said in amazement, "Do you always carry this much?" Choi Yeonseung said matter-of-factly, "Well, because I enjoy cooking, I always carry them with me." Elizabeth thought this guy was talented but a bit unusual, who carries so much just because of a hobby. Choi Yeonseung assigned tasks to those standing there. After all, the hunters who had nothing to do should move these items inside. The ordinary technicians were busy repairing the base. Everyone felt a bit awkward hearing Choi Yeonseung's words. They were indeed busy, but no one said anything, just hesitantly replied, Okay then." Not stopping there, Choi Yeonseung instructed everyone, also, prepared to send a message to the Korean exploration team, informing them that they can use our facilities while their base is being repaired. Elizabeth, carrying the pile of items, said, "The Korean exploration team? Why, do we?" It seems Choi Yeonseung understood what Elizabeth was saying. Choi Yeonseung then said, "Didn't you say that the Korean exploration team suffered great losses from the attack? Since we fought together, we should help each other as we are neighbors." Choi Yeonseung felt a bit speechless about this teammate of his, and without sparing her because she was a woman, Choi Yeonseung straightforwardly said, "I can't believe you're asking this. Come to think of it, you're a bit insensitive." Elizabeth, feeling a bit embarrassed, awkwardly smiled and said to Choi Yeonseung, "Am I, really? We are neighbors, haha." After that, Choi Yeonseung also thought that people here would think like Elizabeth, so Choi Yeonseung said, "I know you guys wouldn't do that, but if anyone dares to discriminate against or bully the Koreans, I will consider it an act of disrespect towards me, because I'm Korean too, understand?" Choi Yeonseung's sharp gaze made them a bit fearful. Someone spoke up, "Sure, no one will be discriminated against." Another person added, We will welcome them warmly, don't worry." At this moment, Kwon Yeonseung and his team had also arrived. He spoke on behalf of them. "Well, I am." Before she could finish her introduction, Elizabeth jumped in and said, "Welcome, Korean hunters." She cheerfully started a conversation, which helped ease the newcomer's shyness. She smiled brightly and continued, "Let's enjoy living together in your base, which is waiting to be renovated. Everyone, on the bright, big sign with the slogan, Hometown of Hunter Choi Yeonseung welcomes the Korean team." Smallwood handed them a package of food and introduced it with a smile. "Here you go. Remember, this is pre-packaged kimchi rice for dungeon use." Kwon Yeonseung shyly accepted it. "Oh, alright, thanks a lot." He felt a bit happy and also quite amazed, wondering why they were giving such a warm welcome. Everyone waved goodbye to Kwon Yeonseung's team. "Alright, we're leaving now. Rest well, everyone. If you need anything, just call us." Kwon Yeonseung and his team awkwardly said, "Thank you all." One teammate whispered to him, "Why are these Americans being so nice to us?" Kwon Yeonseung wondered too, who knows? He stopped paying attention to the Americans and turned to his team. "Alright, let's take a break here. I'll go check around the base." His teammates responded, "Yes, understood." Kwon Yeonseung walked around inspecting the situation, wondering how well their facilities must be to accommodate hunters from other countries. Kwon Yeonseung looked everywhere, through all the nooks and crannies. "This place is huge," he marveled. "I've been walking alone for a long time, and I still haven't reached the end." Suddenly, he spotted something, that over there. "Is that a training area?" Kwon Yeonseung was very surprised to see such a place. At this moment, Choi Yeonseung appeared from behind Kwon Yeonseung, who hadn't noticed him following because he was so absorbed in exploring. Choi Yeonseung said, "Here you are." Choi Yeonseung was wearing a towel over his shoulder. Kwon Yeonseung was startled. "Hunter Choi Yeonseung." Choi Yeonseung cheerfully responded, "Didn't expect to see you here." Kwon Yeonseung was very grateful to Choi Yeonseung, bowing and saying, "Thank you for inviting us here. I should have come to greet you as soon as we arrived." Choi Yeonseung casually replied, "Don't worry about it. We invited you because we still have surplus resources, so there's no need to worry. But this place only has a training area. Are you here to train some more?" Kwon Yeonseung asked somewhat embarrassedly, waving his hand. "What? No, haha. I came into the wrong area, haha," Choi Yeonseung cheerfully said. "Oh, I see. Well, I guess you all need some rest after a big fight." Choi Yeonseung noticed they had been talking for a while and said to Kwon Yeonseung, "Let's train together next time." Kwon Yeonseung was both happy and a bit nervous. "I'm not really the type to train extra hours." What do you mean? Why don't you train extra hours?" Kwon Yeonseung confidently replied, "I'm already strong enough. I don't need extra training." At this point, the atmosphere around Choi Yeonseung turned cold. Choi Yeonseung glanced at him and thought, "I wonder why Lee Chong-shik's team always gets defeated and why people criticize him. It's because of people like him." Kwon Yeonseung noticed Choi Yeonseung's gaze and was very frightened. "Hunter Choi Yeonseung, why are you looking at me like that?" Choi Yeonseung grabbed his shoulder and said, "Hey, Kwon Yeonseung, you're going to train with me now. You can only rest when I say so." Kwon Yeonseung desperately wanted to escape from the devilish Choi Yeonseung. "What? Wait a moment, Hunter Choi Yeonseung." At that very moment, in the US base, high-ranking officials in the command room were reviewing information, aware that those damned orcs were operating very stealthily. They were moving in small groups to steal supplies and sneak out, smarter than usual, and they were worried that if this continued, they would soon run out of rations to distribute. Joseph Grant suspected that, with no other options, he would have to accelerate the plan. He assigned tasks to his subordinates, contacted the exploration teams of each country immediately, and informed them about the proposed plan. His subordinate asked again, "What proposal?" It was to start preparing for the final assault against the orcs, and tell them that if they followed his orders in this operation, he would provide them with all the supplies they needed. But the team member right above his subordinate was extremely frightened and asked why. However, Joseph Grant had no more supplies left. He said with a pensive expression, "It's all right. I just need to reduce the rations given to lower-ranked hunters and civilians. I don't need to give all the supplies as promised because I only need them to participate in the attack first." His subordinate found it hard to believe. How could this be? Joseph Grant was determined. He had only one goal: as long as there was one capable hunter left, they had to conquer the orcs' fortress in the central area. In front of the training room gate, Choi Yeonseung collapsed, sweating profusely, panting with his hands on the ground. Choi Yeonseung saw him like this and, feeling helpless, braced himself on his hands and hips, saying, "I'm out of words," to which Choi Yeonseung replied, "Do you think the enemy will just stand still and let themselves get hit when you use magic? You heard that inside, saying that you should know how to use other magic to restrain the enemy and create openings. You're at a level where you practically have no one-on-one combat experience." After saying this, you crossed your arms, your eyes seemingly sparking, and declared loudly that there was no other choice. "When we return to Earth, you'll have to train with me every day." Hearing this, Choi Yeonseung helplessly stammered, "Anything but this, please." Suddenly, Elizabeth sprinted towards us at full speed, shouting as she ran, "Choi Yeonseung, there's important news from the American base." But upon seeing Choi Yeonseung kneeling in front of you, she stopped and wondered, what are these two doing? Choi Yeonseung reassured Choi Yeonseung not to worry and continued, "Continue with that matter." You crossed your arms with a determined look and asked, "What did the American expedition team say?" Well, to sum it up. They had sat down, and Choi Yeonseung said, "If we want to get supplies from them, we will have to participate in the final attack and obey their orders." Elizabeth agreed with your point. Yes, basically, it's a threat disguised as a proposal. You propped your chin on your hand and thought, it seems we've been underestimated. I never thought I'd be publicly considered so easily swayed. Elizabeth asked you, "So what should we do now?" "There's nothing else. We've received the proposal, so we should respond politely. Make sure to relay my exact words now and arrange for reconnaissance in the U.S. as well." At the American expedition base, night had fallen. Inside the expedition base, Joseph Grant was intently watching the screens of the surveillance equipment for the scouting teams. As he watched, he asked his staff, "How did the other expedition teams respond?" The staff member next to him replied, "Most of them accepted our proposal." At that moment, a scene of devastation appeared on the screen. Everyone seemed exhausted and it looked like they had suffered significant losses. They responded immediately. I guess the offer of supplies was very effective. And the A-rank hunters from Germany and France whom we contacted through special channels. Ben Nahart and Adeline Bonabaluja have accepted the special offer. Hearing the staff's report, Joseph Grant exclaimed, "Wonderful, everything is going according to plan. Then, it's just choosing between South Korea and China and Dragon Industries." The staff member continued, "Yes, China is usually quite closed off, so we don't expect a positive response. We will soon hear back from the remaining teams." At that moment, a staff member from the control system informed Joseph Grant that they had just received a response from them. Hearing this, Joseph Grant ran to the control panel and asked, "Really? Did they agree?" The staff member replied, Dragon Industries and their allies, South Korea, will participate in the final attack, but since we have plenty of supplies, they will not follow the orders of people like you." That's what they said. Hearing this, Joseph Grant was very angry, his face contorted. If I wanted to follow their commands, they would be more than happy to consider it. His staff, hearing Choi Yeonseung's words, were extremely angry. They clenched the paper in their hands and shouted, "These damned insolent bastards." Joseph Grant waved his hand and said, "Forget it, since we have good investors, it seems they are already prepared." After saying this, he turned and walked away, saying to his staff, "Let them do whatever they want. If people like them don't participate, it won't make any difference." "Yes, understood, sir. Inform the expedition teams that agreed to my proposal to gather their hunters and meet here. Once they have assembled, we will begin the final assault." Choi Yeonseung stood high above, surveying the entire scene and said, "They've gathered quite a few people, haven't they?" But seeing the weary and dejected faces of those men, Choi Yeonseung thought it didn't look very promising. Choi Yeonseung worried if they could actually fight well in that condition. Elizabeth and Kwon Young-sung, following Choi Yeonseung, took turns reporting the situation to him. Choi Yeonseung, Ikaros, and the Flower Mountain faction had completed their preparations, and the Korean exploration team was ready. Hearing this, Choi Yeonseung felt reassured and said, "All right, good job." Then Choi Yeonseung stopped and looked at the scene ahead. Seeing this, Elizabeth asked, "What are you pondering?" "Nothing. "Just a bit curious and worried," he replied. "I'm wondering why, with so many people gathered, they haven't moved yet. Have we received any updates from the scouts we sent out?" At that moment, a loud sound shook the earth, and all three were stunned, not knowing what was happening. Loud shouts rang out. "What's going on? Is that sound coming from the fortress?" From somewhere, a man rushed up with a panicked voice. "Hunter Choi Yeonseung, the Exploration Alliance has already begun their actions." Hearing this, Choi Yeonseung turned around in surprise and asked the man, "Have they already started?" "What do you mean? We haven't begun moving yet." The man then started explaining, "It's a decoy tactic, they're using low-level hunters as the vanguard to lure the orcs. The remaining people will deal with the orcs and wipe them out quickly. They will soon transition to setting up an ambush." Elizabeth, hearing this, questioned, "But doesn't that mean most of the hunters used as the vanguard will be killed?" "Well, we can't do anything if that's their choice. Orcs are quite simple creatures, so this tactic might work." "But what's going on? The orcs are unusually quiet even though the fortress gate is under attack, as if no one is inside." Choi Yeonseung said, noticing the light from the distant mountain where some shadowy figures were faintly visible. On the opposite mountain, a monster looked at the people below in the valley and said, "Kaka, foolish humans." It turned out to be a great orc warrior, carrying a huge axe on his shoulder, with a fierce face. They had gathered here just as the master had revealed. His eyes widened, and he swung his axe, shouting, "All right, let's go, loyal followers of the master." A horde of monsters charged forward, radiating murderous intent. "Kill them all. The filthy humans have sullied this land with their dirt." The two people heard the noise and turned around, but they still couldn't picture what was coming at them. "What is that?" When the orcs got close, they realized and panicked, not knowing what was happening. "Why are the orcs here?" "It's an ambush, the orcs have ambushed us." The orcs were all wielding weapons, charging to take the lives of everyone. Seeing the entire battle on the screen, the warrior danced and raved, saying, "Those idiots. They don't even know the basics of war. Do they really think the orcs are too stupid to notice that they're being ambushed and that they're careless? They don't realize that I planted countless spies among them. Well, it doesn't matter to me, because the more deaths caused by your stupidity, the stronger I become." He laughed heartily. "Ha ha, keep going, keep going." At this moment, Choi Yeonseung and the others rushed in, wondering who those guys were and where they had come from. "Hold on, damn it." Choi Yeonseung and his teammates moved swiftly through the forest, searching for their target. Choi Yeonseung sped ahead and asked, "How could they know all our plans?" Kwon Young-sung, running behind, added, Choi Yeonseung, is it wise for us to retreat in this situation?" Choi Yeonseung didn't turn around and replied, It might be." Watching the monsters gradually reveal themselves from the forest, he said, "But without us, all these hunters would be dead." Saying this, Choi Yeonseung sped up even more. "There will be fewer hunters, and we will have a tough time dealing with them afterward." Kwon Young-sung responded, "Oh, I see now, I understand." He also closed the gap with Choi Yeonseung and asked, "But why are you running all over the battlefield? Aren't we supposed to help them?" Choi Yeonseung smirked and said, "Because, since ancient times, capturing an abandoned building has been proven to be the most effective way to gain resources efficiently. The hunters of old used barriers to protect that small village." Kwon Young-sung asked, "Why is this barrier so sturdy?" The hunters saw that the barrier didn't kill the monsters. In fact, they were growing stronger and getting closer. And why aren't these things moving at all? A man named Joseph appeared holding an agreement, and the hunters were alarmed. "If we fail or flee, that bastard Joseph won't just deny us any reward for capturing the fortress. He'll also demand compensation for not adhering to and violating the covenant. We at least need to destroy the fortress, if we can't lure them out. But why is this happening?" The hunter said, annoyed. Suddenly, a pair of feet stopped, and Choi Yeonseung slowly approached, saying, "You still haven't been able to get past the fortress?" Hunter Choi Yeonseung. The unnamed hunter responded to Choi Yeonseung's earlier question, "Yes, we tried attacking with everything we had, but the barrier was too solid." Choi Yeonseung said, "All right. Well done, you can rest now." Choi Yeonseung entered alone and said, "I will end it here." With that, Choi Yeonseung made a hand motion and conjured a wave of power. His fist tightened more and more. To a certain extent, Choi Yeonseung unleashed a move known as the Celestial Fist. The hunter was stunned, thinking, he destroyed the barrier with just one strike? So this is what an A-rank hunter is like. Choi Yeonseung turned to them and said, "Alright, quickly destroy the gate and move in, after all, this is nothing compared to the barrier." They replied, "What? We're going to advance into the fortress now? The other hunters are nearly wiped out." Choi Yeonseung glanced at them and said, "Oh, don't worry about them. I plan to help them so they can take a break." As night fell, the fire was lit. The hunters continued fighting the monsters relentlessly. Suddenly, a scream rang out. Joseph Grant swung his sword and cut down a pile of orcs. Joseph Grant gritted his teeth and said, "Damn it, these orcs, how can they figure out our plan?" He said, "The best option now is to retreat, but the base is too far, we'll be dead before we get there." Joseph Grant, with his face covered in dust, asked, "What should I do now?" Meanwhile, Choi Yeonseung stood on something, looking down at the small village. Then, Choi Yeonseung's entire body emitted a glow. Choi Yeonseung was using his presence power to shield the village and shouted, "The great fortress has been captured." From above, Choi Yeonseung asked, "Anyone who wants to survive, quickly run this way." Choi Yeonseung then pulled out a white flag and waved it vigorously for everyone to see. "I repeat, the great fortress." Joseph Grant, stunned, said, "What is he doing? When did he get here? He wasn't here most of the time." An underling rushed over and said, "Hunter Joseph, I think this is our chance. The orcs are still staring at the fortress, unsure of what to do." All the orcs were shocked by the fortress being seized, and they seemed dazed. An orc leader, seeing this situation, turned to his comrades and said, "Stop standing around, you idiots, we can retake the fortress by killing those bastards." An orc minion said, "But Lord Kitala, what if the boss is angry about the fortress being lost?" Kitala, irritated, turned around and said, "You fool." Seeing the minion ask, the whole group of orcs began murmuring, "But if we let these humans stay here, we should still retake our fortress." Kitala, seeing none of his subordinates listening, showed extreme frustration. Meanwhile, one of Joseph Grant's subordinates said, "Please give the order." Joseph Grant, surprised that things weren't going his way, grit his teeth in frustration. Then Joseph Grant raised his sword and shouted, "Listen up. All hunters stop fighting and retreat to the fortress before the orcs recover their spirits." Seeing this, Joseph Grant's subordinates disregarded everything and hurriedly ran forward, retreating. "We've been ordered to retreat." Everyone quickly escaped to the fortress. Back at the fortress, Choi Yeonseung, with his arms crossed, said, "Well, think about it. This is the first time I've met you in person. Nice to meet you, Hunter Joseph." The eyes of the two men flashed with fire as they stared at each other. Joseph Grant sighed and asked, "Other than that, is there anything else we need to do?" Choi Yeonseung replied, "What do we need to do? Why are you asking me that?" Joseph Grant asked in confusion, "What?" Choi Yeonseung said, "I'll be assigning areas to each country, so you just need to ensure you can protect your own side, that's all I'm doing." Joseph Grant expressed his dissatisfaction, saying, "Are you serious? You don't want to manage things even after taking the fortress?" Choi Yeonseung replied, "Why would I want to? It's not like you guys won't listen to me." Choi Yeonseung, appearing serious, approached Joseph Grant and whispered, "But I have something I need to ask of you." Looking at the others, who were exhausted and sitting on the ground, Choi Yeonseung said, "I heard the vanguard of the hunters say that the reason they risked their lives to become the vanguard is because." Choi Yeonseung placed a hand lightly on Joseph Grant's shoulder and continued, "Because you threatened them in many ways to make them pay a huge cost, which left them completely stunned." He quickly pulled away from Choi Yeonseung's hand and said, "Who dares to frame me?" This campaign was approved by. Choi Yeonseung interrupted, saying, "You'll definitely say it was everyone, right? Well, I don't really care, the past will only bring chaos." At this moment, Choi Yeonseung's entire demeanor exuded a thin layer of murderous intent. Choi Yeonseung looked at Joseph Grant and said, "But if you dare to play tricks in front of me, I'll throw you out of the fortress, remember that." Joseph Grant finally compromised and said, "All right, I'll remember that, good." Having dealt with the scheming Joseph Grant, Choi Yeonseung turned to the other hunters and said, "Let's move to our assigned positions." Everyone seemed confused and looked around. Choi Yeonseung noticed and said, "I know you're all struggling, but I don't think we have time to rest." The fortress was shaking, and the people inside could feel it. Some of them voiced their concern. Why is there shaking? Could it be the orcs? Looking outside, a huge army of orcs was approaching. That's right, it's them, based on the intensity of the shaking. The orc leader, at the forefront, advanced, their faces grim and terrifying. The people inside the fortress announced, they've definitely decided to launch a full-scale attack. The hunters, who had just fought hard outside and had a brief rest, saw the orcs arriving and said anxiously, a full-scale attack by the orcs. Damn it, we've been fighting all day without eating, and we're exhausted. Seeing the situation, Choi Yeonseung fell silent for a moment. Then he spoke up, is anyone here hungry? Causing them to look at him in confusion. Choi Yeonseung then raised his hand to reveal a storage space and said, we've already moved supplies into the base, so there isn't much left here, but… As soon as he finished speaking, a whole basket of rice balls fell out. Seeing the whole pile of rice balls falling endlessly behind, Choi Yeonseung said, if you like, each person can take a portion when you go out. This is an emergency rice ball I made out of preference. Imagining Choi Yeonseung standing by the stove making rice balls, the people thought, is he making so many just because he likes it? He's an A-rank hunter? As the hunters were about to eat the rice balls, Choi Yeonseung said, oh, and those rice balls are made from special rice, so they have mana recovery effects. He also held a rice ball in his hand and said, you should eat them before you go out because they are better than most potions. Hearing this, everyone was astonished and said, what? Rice that recovers mana? Then the blonde hunter, touched, asked, I didn't expect you to share something so valuable. Why are you doing this? Choi Yeonseung said, why? Choi Yeonseung winked at him and said, didn't I just say, we need to help each other in times like this? Looking at the mountain of rice balls in front, the blonde and the red scarf cried, Hunter Choi Yeonseung. On the other side, Joseph Grant was still cursing Choi Yeonseung, that damned hypocrite pretending to be a good person, and his subordinate added fuel to the fire, saying, but it seems he has managed to win everyone over. Joseph Grant, unwilling, said, actually, this is better for me, while he attracts the attention of other hunters. The guy made a plan and said, I will quietly approach Ben Nahart and Adeline Bonabaluja, the ones I proposed for priority rewards from this raid. Joseph Grant confidently said, then I will execute the plan of the Bloodsteel General as intended. Outside, the orcs had already approached the fortress. The orcs roared loudly and ferociously. They banged their heads against the barrier trying to break it. Inside, the hunters were diligently protecting the barrier. The barrier was collapsing, everyone focused. An old man with white hair said to everyone, those who can use defensive magic, step up quickly. Just as Hunter Choi Yeonseung said, this is the time to help each other. Seeing the rampaging orcs charging this way, he said, if they breach the fortress, we're done for. On top of the fortress, Elizabeth said, the orcs seem quite fierce. She said, judging by their excitement, they might be planning to end everything here. Choi Yeonseung replied, that might be the case. Watching the orcs frenziedly attacking the barrier, Choi Yeonseung said, anyway, to them, we might be like rats cornered. You stared at the orcs and said, however, getting the orcs to move as a united group is challenging since they rarely listen to anyone. Choi Yeonseung suddenly remembered something and said, I think the bloodthirsty and crazy warrior is related to this. Looking at the orcs' fortress, Choi Yeonseung concluded that there must be a monster boss issuing orders from the rear. Elizabeth, noticing this, asked, if a constellation is involved, it will be difficult to resolve the current situation. Choi Yeonseung replied, that's right, that's why. Choi Yeonseung then stretched and said, I will go and kill him myself. Elizabeth, astonished, asked, you want to kill the monster boss alone? Is that feasible? Choi Yeonseung replied, of course, it's actually much easier for me to go alone. Suddenly, Choi Yeonseung noticed something and said, what if I bring along some useless hunters, Below the fortress, 3 people were sneaking out. Seeing Joseph Grant among them, Choi Yeonseung asked, what are they doing? On the orcs' fortress, an elderly white-haired orc laughed and said, Kakaka, foolish humans just flail about as they please. This orc is the leader, Orc Igorka, who was sitting in a chair and said, even if you do this, you are still dancing in the palm of our master's hand. Igorka stood up, holding the armrest, and said, once they are done flailing, I will personally attack the fortress. He shouted and laughed, saying, "Smash their heads and elevate our master's reputation." The old orc Igorka grinned wickedly. On the other side, the one referred to as the master watched Igorka's image with approval and said, "Ho ho ho, excellent, Igorka." The master said, "It was a wise decision to choose you as the boss." Then he switched scenes to the fortress of Choi Yeonseung, which was surrounded by a group of orcs, and said, "That's right, rebel as much as you want, since there's no way those humans can harm you." He gritted his teeth, laughing while showing anger, and said, "This time, the arrogant humans will definitely be crushed." Back at Igorka's tent, he lifted the curtain and went outside to instruct his subordinates. In the bushes, a pair of legs was slowly approaching. It was Joseph Grant, who had reached the orcs' fortress. Looking at the orc leader Igorka, he said, "They have let their guard down, just as that person said." Joseph Grant turned to his subordinates and said, "Ben Nahart, Adeline Bonabaluja, you two are ready, right?" Ben Nahart replied from behind, "Yes, I am in top condition," and Adeline Bonabaluja also said, "So am I." The three of them hid behind the bushes and whispered, "All right, I will explain the plan one last time." Joseph Grant's plan was arranged as follows. Once I give the signal, Adeline Bonabaluja, who is proficient in long-range magic, will attack the guards around the orc boss. Next, Ben Nahart, the close combat fighter, will approach the orc boss quickly and use his physical strength to hold him there. Joseph Grant, gripping his sword, said, "Finally, I will follow Ben Nahart and use the divine weapon, obtained from the master, to eliminate him instantly." The sword in Joseph Grant's hand emitted a blue light, saying, "I will use life poison to take his life." Seeing this, Ben Nahart asked, "One strike will be enough, right?" Joseph Grant replied, "Of course, this dagger is just like the cloak I received from the master." He asked, "Haven't you seen their power yourself?" Ben Nahart then stared at his hand and said that the cloak's concealment ability is superb. Remembering how the three of them had glided past 3 groups of orcs without being detected, Ben Nahart sighed and said, "Thanks to it, we could get here without using magic, as if we had become invisible." Joseph Grant lowered his head and replied, "Of course, the master said this holy artifact will not be detected unless another constellation is present." Looking at Igorka carrying a massive axe on his back, Joseph Grant said, "I feel reassured now, it's impossible for that orc to be a constellation." Ben Nahart confidently said, "And since no constellation in the world has enough time to arrive at a battle for the territory of another constellation." At this moment, up on a tree, Choi Yeonseung had overheard the previous conversation of the three and said, "Well then." Choi Yeonseung remembered Dragon Wong had come up with a so-called perfect plan, and now Choi Yeonseung thought, "I didn't think Dragon Wong's plan could be this good." Choi Yeonseung stood on a branch, looking down, thinking, "I could never have imagined such thoroughness even in my dreams." Joseph Grant and his group were hiding. He said to the people behind him, "Everyone, remember this. If the boss of those monsters has the blessing of a constellation, then he will be able to see through the cloak if you get too close." Joseph Grant spoke in a deep voice, "If we fail because of this and their protection becomes tighter, then I won't be able to assassinate him anymore. This action must succeed on the first try, understood?" After that, Joseph Grant ordered Adeline Bonabaluja, "All right, start now. Adeline Bonabaluja, speak quickly, understood?" "I'm ready." Then Adeline Bonabaluja used her golden orb to begin executing the order. The monsters panicked when they saw many magical circles appearing to burn them. They screamed, "What's going on?" Adeline Bonabaluja gave the command. Magic bullets pierced through. The boss of the monsters angrily said to the small monsters, "What is this?" Suddenly, "What's happening?" The small monster hesitantly answered, "Great leader, I think the humans have launched a surprise attack." As soon as he finished speaking, his head was severed. Joseph Grant and his group were still hiding. Joseph Grant ordered Ben Nahart, "All right Ben Nahart, it's your turn." The person named Ben Nahart hurriedly followed the instructions. Ben Nahart shouted, "I'm on my way," and he shot out like a rocket attacking the monsters. When it was the turn of the monster leader, Ben Nahart had already stood behind and called out loudly, "Hey big guy." As it turned around, he charged and confronted it. Initially, the two were evenly matched. He said to the leader, "I've heard you are the master of the orcs, a creature with nothing but physical strength. I'm here to see if you are really strong or not." The orc leader snarled, "How dare a sneaky rat like you challenge my strength?" Both held each other's hands tightly, as if nothing could stop them. The orc leader attacked first. "Your arrogance truly knows no bounds," he said to Ben Nahart. Ben Nahart was in a difficult position. The leader's strength was too overwhelming. Ben Nahart gritted his teeth and endured, thinking he could easily resist his power even though he had been buffed. At that moment, the boss also thought, "Damn it. He's stronger than I expected. If I can't end this fight in one blow, I will truly be in danger." Ben Nahart seemed to be struggling to resist any longer. Joseph Grant had appeared from behind the boss. He plunged a knife deep into the boss's back. "Don't worry, I'm sure I'll take him down." The monster was suddenly attacked, unable to react in time, making him passive, and at the same time, stepping one step into the gate. He might not survive this moon. He was bewildered. What is this? The strength is leaving my body. Unable to bear it, he collapsed to the ground. Suddenly, Elizabeth sprinted towards us at full speed, shouting as she ran, "Choi Yeonseung, there's important news from the American base." But at this moment, a more powerful constellation was observing the battle from afar. The constellation said, "That dagger, judging by how it is enveloped by this disgusting vitality, must belong to the Bloodsteel General. It's truly not easy to find a monster that can withstand this level of poison in the entire abyss. Perhaps only a few monsters like that exist. Yet he has handed such a rare item to a human. The general must be determined to use all his might this time, but I guess you don't know. That Igorka is the strongest monster among those that can withstand this toxin, right? He is the warrior with the strongest vitality of mine." And as he finished speaking, the orcs leader writhed and got up, more fierce, gloomy, and bloodthirsty than before. Joseph Grant was horrified by this change. It seemed that the knife had no effect on him. He grabbed Joseph Grant by the neck and said, "I, the servant of the blood and madness warrior, Igorka, will never fall unless I die." He exploded in a fury, throwing everything in his vicinity. Of course, including Ben Nahart and Joseph Grant, who were attacking him, causing both of them to fall to the ground. The orcs leader, with what seemed like a buffed strength, made Joseph and his allies fall off their mounts, as their plan had failed miserably. Adeline Bonabaluja ran over and saw the two in a terrible state. She worriedly said, "Joseph, Ben Nahart, are you all right?" Ben Nahart, panting with anger, was somewhat frustrated with Joseph's plan, which seemed perfect but had too many flaws. He questioned him, "Damn it, what's going on, Joseph? You said it would die in one strike, so why is that monster still full of energy and standing so firm?" Joseph, wiping the corner of his mouth, struggled to say, "The master surely told me that." Suddenly, a message came to Joseph. The sender was the general. "Oh, it didn't work? Then running away is the best option right now," he continued. The others also read the message, and all of them were utterly powerless in the current situation. Ben Nahart shouted angrily, "Joseph, you worthless fool." The boss had now approached them. His hoarse voice said, "You fools. Now you have no tricks left, right? If so, it's time for you to pay for your stupidity." The boss now raised his weapon high. The constellation told him, "I will grant you greater power, kill them for me." He laughed maniacally, "Thank you, my lord." Joseph, Adeline Bonabaluja, and Ben Nahart were stunned and could do nothing. Despite his grandiose declarations, he continued, "In response to the blessings you have bestowed, I will behead each rat and present them to you as offerings." Seeing him charging fiercely, Joseph excitedly shouted, "We're done for, we need to run away now." The group thought they would surrender to the leader right there when Choi Yeonseung appeared like a god, radiating a salvific light. Choi Yeonseung confronted the boss. "Earlier you said you would never fall unless you died, right?" The monster sensed someone else here. Choi Yeonseung continued, "All right then, now you can fall," and had already jumped onto the boss's back, leaving it no time to react. It was in a state of panic, thinking, "Why didn't I notice this person behind me? When did this happen?" Before he could finish thinking, Choi Yeonseung attacked him, leaving him unable to react. His head was smashed. When did Ben Nahart and Joseph run away? Seeing the boss's head, they were extremely horrified. Even its own constellation was taken aback by this scene. Gradually, Choi Yeonseung landed on the ground. Joseph and the blood and madness warrior both exclaimed in terror, "How did you do that? Why? How on earth did you manage that? Is it you again, Choi Yeonseung? At this moment, the system also displayed that the great orc leader Igorka had fallen. The warriors of madness and blood had been lost. The first abyssal kingdom had become one of the continents on Earth, and he was screaming frantically, this was impossible. The system board also showed a notification to the Earth hunters. The orcs had been expelled from the continent, and the hunters were shocked to see the orcs gradually disappearing. What is this? Is it real? Look over there, the boss being defeated means that the subordinates are gradually vanishing. As the orcs were disappearing, Choi Yeonseung had not yet updated the situation in front of him. So he asked, what sudden thing is happening? Elizabeth laughed and said, what else could happen? I guess he must have left with the explosion, that was our trump card. At the same time, but at a different location, Joseph angrily said to Choi Yeonseung, how the hell are you here? Choi Yeonseung, in contrast to him, casually replied, it seems we were thinking alike, although things turned out better for me thanks to your oversight. Choi Yeonseung's words successfully made him angrier than before. I will not acknowledge this, you just sneaked in and stole all the credit. Do you think we would accept that? Choi Yeonseung remarked about Joseph. He could see through his plan, quite sharp. Joseph was determined this time not to let him take all the credit in the first abyssal territory alone. He thought to himself because it was no different from giving him the right to choose all the wealth and treasures of this territory. Since he is alone, I will have to use force to scare him into sharing that authority. Ben Nahart, who was beside him, overheard him mumbling something and asked, hey, what are you talking about? Ben Nahart had no opinion. Adeline Bonabaluja also had no opinion, but they did not agree with Joseph's way of doing things. Seeing this, Joseph turned around sharply and asked, what did the two of you just say? Ben Nahart recounted past events while explaining to Joseph that, thanks to that irresponsible leader of ours, I was deceived for a long time. If it weren't for him, I would have been dead. Ben Nahart said to Joseph, how can you say that? Did he monopolize all of our achievements? Adeline Bonabaluja agrees with Ben Nahart and says that Joseph is an ungrateful person. Joseph was furious when he heard his teammates say such things. What the hell is this? What suddenly happened to them? Ben Nahart, who was standing next to Choi Yeonseung, said, I'm sorry for saying this so late, Choi Yeonseung, thank you very much, it seems like I owe you a lot today. Choi Yeonseung was puzzled. Owe me a lot? This is our first meeting. Ben Nahart continued to tell Choi Yeonseung, actually, I ate the mana recovery rice balls you gave us, because of that, I restored a lot of my energy. Ben Nahart also mentioned, I heard that many of Adeline Bonabaluja's teammates also recovered thanks to it. Adeline Bonabaluja, who was standing next to them, emotionally confirmed, that's true. Ben Nahart expressed his sincere gratitude to Choi Yeonseung. I want to repay you if I get the chance, so I'm glad I could help you out like this. Joseph, who had been watching them talk, felt that what Ben Nahart was doing was very unreasonable and insane. Joseph pointed at Ben Nahart and shouted, are you sharing the raid rewards just because of a rice ball? Have you lost your mind? He immediately retorted when he heard such nonsense, huh? I don't want to hear that from anyone. Who is threatening us with assistance? If you're not happy, you should make a proper deal with that monster leader. Now you're trying to blame us. Joseph stammered, what did you just say? He suddenly remembered something and doubted. Don't tell me Choi Yeonseung was just pretending to be easygoing and kind-hearted, all for a bigger purpose? At this very moment? Choi Yeonseung, that cunning bastard. Choi Yeonseung, who was now the center of attention, thought to himself, I don't know why they're having internal conflicts, but anyway, it seems like everything is settled. A few days later, on Earth, the Ikaros faction. The news headlines read, the person who made the biggest contribution after the Hellgate raid. Choi Yeonseung. Anya Lorenz read the news and wondered what had stirred up outside. He's the center of attention again, but why is he still training instead of resting? Choi Yeonseung was exercising and answered Anya Lorenz's question, to me. This is already resting, I'm just training with no energy left in my body. Choi Yeonseung looked at Anya Lorenz and asked, by the way, is something up? Haven't you been busy with the business in hell? She awkwardly scratched her head and said, I came to invite you for dinner. Choi Yeonseung asked with curiosity, dinner? Have you started feeling lonely eating by yourself? Anya Lorenz immediately responded, not for me, but for someone else. Choi Yeonseung suddenly raised his voice at her, speaking seriously. Anya Lorenz cleared her throat and continued. He is also one of the CEOs of Dragon Industries. I hadn't invited him until now because I didn't think these meetings would be comfortable for him. But he is recognized as one of the great achievements, isn't he? That's why people have started paying more attention to our company's artifacts. On Anya Lorenz's tablet, there was information suggesting that Dragon Industries, a leading company in Hell, might be involved in artifact business. Anya Lorenz continued talking without stopping, suggesting that if he was invited to the dinner, he might discuss some issues at the same time. Choi Yeonseung, still not fully convinced, asked again, "Are you sure they won't have a problem seeing me become CEO?" She honestly replied, "To be honest, that is a possibility. A bunch of probing questions might be thrown at you as soon as you sit down. I have tried to decline the invitation from my side." Choi Yeonseung handed her the tablet and seriously responded, "All right, I will prepare for this." Anya Lorenz asked in surprise, "Really?" Choi Yeonseung quickly replied that he had already planned everything, so she shouldn't worry too much. Choi Yeonseung honestly admitted that he was curious to see what the top CEOs of the world's leading corporations were like. Dragon Wong was at an annual meeting. Although he had already spoken at the company, he wanted to repeat it once more. Someone congratulated him. "Congratulations on the success of the Hell Gate raid. Congratulations, Chairman." The speaker was Goldblum, the CEO of Dragon Motors. The others also chimed in, "Congratulations, Chairman," and Dragon Wong thanked everyone for their congratulations. But in his mind, he had different images and thoughts. Highs. Look at this bunch. Everything they collect. They only bring up issues about performance and conflicts while disguising them as business advice. Why are they so unusually calm today? Are they all on the same side today? Goldblum spoke again. The success of that raid was indeed a huge opportunity. We could dominate the world in the next 20 years. It cannot be denied that the greatest contributor is Hunter Choi Yeonseung. Thinking about an incredible hunter acting for our benefit. I am just amazed by the luck you have with everyone, Chairman. But I wonder if those abilities will also strengthen the business. That's something we need to observe as his partner. I am sure you are also aware of this, Chairman, with businesses going bankrupt when people trust the reputation of famous hunters and hire them as CEOs. After hearing this, Dragon Wong began to analyze the issue for everyone to see. It's a small and medium-sized business. Isn't it different from our case? Everyone except Dragon Wong began to argue. But Dragon Artifacts is a core subsidiary responsible for the essential technologies required in other industries. That is precisely why we need a professional executive. If the company becomes so shaky, it could have a huge impact on our group. Then they all said in unison, "Please reconsider." Dragon Wong cursed inwardly. "Oh, these idiots are shouting in my face. I would be completely fine if Choi Yeonseung came and talked to them about himself. But where the hell is he?" Choi Yeonseung was currently in a kitchen. "And you cook with exceptional skill," before the bewildered eyes of the head chef and assistant chef. The two of them whisper back and forth, with the head chef saying, "Is he the one?" "I think so, but what is this situation here? Why is a top-level hunter cooking in our kitchen?" While the meeting was extremely tense, a sudden knock on the door broke the silence. The person outside spoke up, "Chairman, I brought the meal, may I set it up?" Chairman Dragon Wong responded, "Oh, it's already done?" He then looked at the CEOs, noticing that everyone seemed more sensitive due to hunger, and suggested, "Let's continue our discussion after we eat." The first person spoke up, expressing reluctance to eat, saying, "The head chef's skills are fine, but the seasoning is quite strong, so it doesn't suit my taste." Dragon Wong told the outside chefs, "Come in here first, quickly." The chef, a bit worried, replied, "Yes, sir, I'll come in right away." The chef quickly pushed the food cart into the room. Dragon Wong didn't see the food, only the pots. He asked the chef, "What are these metal pots for?" Before the head chef could respond, Dragon Wong continued, "Head chef, why did you bring these metal pots? Didn't I request Western dishes?" The head chef looked at the chairman, hesitatingly saying, "About this, I haven't cooked all these dishes." Choi Yeonseung then stepped in to save the head chef, saying, "These are the dishes I prepared myself." "It seems a bit odd to come here empty-handed?" The CEOs who saw him immediately asked, "Are you the hunter Choi Yeonseung?" Dragon Wong was somewhat surprised and excited. "Choi Yeonseung, why are you here?" Choi Yeonseung asked, "Didn't you invite me?" Dragon Wong, slightly unsure of how to respond, said, "Are you serious? You should have come here as soon as you arrived. Why did you cook these?" Choi Yeonseung replied softly, "Oh, it's because of the CEO's present here." A CEO close to him spoke up, "You're late because of us. I don't understand what you're talking about." Suddenly, Choi Yeonseung made unrelated but astonishing statements, mentioning anemia, high blood pressure, chronic fatigue, insomnia. "Is there anyone here who isn't affected by these conditions?" The others exchanged glances, looking at each other. "How does he know this? Our health and medical information is supposed to be confidential." Choi Yeonseung seemed to understand what they were hinting at and said, "There's no need to be too surprised. When you practice martial arts, you naturally learn more about your surroundings and people with just a glance. And since I discovered this, I couldn't do nothing. Everyone's health directly affects the future of our company. To celebrate our first meeting, I prepared a feast to improve health." First, Choi Yeonseung introduced the spicy beef soup. This dish can be considered a complete supplement. As Choi Yeonseung ladled the soup into bowls, he meticulously introduced it, saying that ferns help with insomnia and improve cardiovascular health, bean sprouts help detoxify the body, and beef boosts the immune system and prevents anemia. Choi Yeonseung then moved on to serve the rice, and if you eat the rice grains that I specially grew, it will create the perfect spicy beef soup meal. He instructed the chefs to place the dishes in front of the CEOs, telling everyone to eat before the food gets cold, and to let him know if they wanted more. Choi Yeonseung then brought the next dish to Goldblum, who was not far from him. When he saw Choi Yeonseung bringing food for him, he said, "Hunter Choi Yeonseung, I appreciate your concern, but we didn't come here to eat." Choi Yeonseung did not answer immediately. He asked him, "You are Goldblum from Longchi, aren't you?" Goldblum, surprised, said, "You know me? You are the most business savvy among the CEOs, and with such an important position, you should first take care of your health. If you fall ill, our company will lose a significant resource, won't we? So, make sure you eat on time. Isn't that why we work, to be able to eat and live well?" Goldblum wanted to decline the meal, saying, "Sorry, I don't like Korean food." But he then smelled the aroma of the dish and was gradually tempted by it. The spicy flavor was something he had never experienced before, and it was filling his nostrils. Goldblum remembered, "No way, I've never finished a meal, even at Michelin-starred restaurants." "I'm drooling," Choi Yeonseung whispered in his ear. "What do you think? Want to eat now?" He honestly replied, "It does smell very good, but I will eat what you have painstakingly prepared." He said he would only taste a little, just a bit. The others also said they would just sample a little. But after everyone tasted it together, their taste buds exploded from the flavor of the dish. All the vegetables were tender, and the beef was so soft it enhanced the flavor. Then came the warm soup as the complete flavor glided through their mouths. The explosion of spiciness made them marvel at its taste, balancing the spicy soup with rice. They then seemed to have found their soul food. It was so delicious that they couldn't stop eating. Seeing their reactions, Choi Yeonseung was thrilled to find that their response was even better than he had anticipated. Choi Yeonseung remembered, "I know that the cattle and crops the orcs cultivate have mana recovery abilities. But it can also help restore energy for ordinary people. The taste must be great since even picky rich people are enjoying it. Because of this, I have gathered a lot of useful information. The experiment, I mean, it's great because I prepared this for testing purposes." Choi Yeonseung had come up with many wonderful plans and was very excited about his next steps. Dragon Wong and the CEOs put down their dessert glasses. Everyone had enjoyed a very delicious meal. Dragon Wong snapped his fingers to show off to Choi Yeonseung. "Choi Yeonseung, it has been a long time since I enjoyed a meal like this," to which Choi Yeonseung replied, "I'm glad everyone liked it." CEO Goldblum wiped his mouth while speaking, "What an incredible feast, Mr. Choi Yeonseung. If you were to join the food industry, you would surely achieve great success, but," he continued, "you are the CEO of Dragon Artifact. This position requires more than just cooking skills, therefore, we need to hear your plans as the CEO of Dragon Artifact." Choi Yeonseung didn't make him wait long. He spoke up, "Surely, you're worried the company will go bankrupt if a hunter like me becomes CEO." Goldblum thought. In response to Choi Yeonseung's words, that was not what he had said. Choi Yeonseung clicked his tongue, Fine, going into details will be meaningless, so, I will only make one promise. He seriously stated his plan in front of the chairman and all the leading CEOs. If the new artifact we are about to release doesn't top the sales charts, I will voluntarily step down as CEO. Everyone there had their own thoughts about Choi Yeonseung. That's quite a bold decision. I thought he wasn't interested in the job. Does he actually have a plan? Dragon Wong pondered. This kid has prepared a decisive move. I thought he wouldn't be able to convince these people. But to be number one? This industry isn't that easy. Dragon Wong felt a pang of irritation at Choi Yeonseung's actions. What are you thinking, Choi Yeonseung? At the Parker building. Inside the meeting room, everyone was tense, watching Alex Parker's dark expression. He pondered for a moment. Annoyed, he glanced at the group and said, Joseph Grant's failure was an unforeseen accident. That's not what the people sitting here are going to discuss, right? The group hesitated. Of course, Mr. Chairman. Alex Parker got straight to the point. Good. Now let's talk about the countermeasures everyone has prepared. Hearing this, one person hesitated for a moment before standing up and replying, Yes, sir. Allow me to present the countermeasures based on our findings regarding Parker's artifacts. Recently, the number of hunters entering the abyss for combat experience has been rapidly increasing. We estimate a high demand for combat artifacts, so we need to launch new products based on this information. Hearing this, Alex Parker nodded and asked, I like this plan, but exactly what will we be launching? He immediately pulled up the data to check. Currently, we are still in the research phase. How long will the production take? We don't have a specific timeline yet, the person answered. Alex Parker pressed, What about the product promotion strategy after the product is completed? He replied, There are still too many factors to consider before we get to that step. Continuously disappointing answers led to Alex Parker's anger. He shouted, You idiots, are you telling me this is the countermeasure? If this is all the presentation from those around me, I suppose I don't need to hear what the others have to say. End the meeting for today. Next time, come with a complete plan. I don't have to say what will happen next, right? The group responded in unison. Yes, Mr. Chairman. Alex Parker, furious, waved his hand. Get out. I don't want to see anyone. As soon as he finished speaking, the group, not daring to object, quickly left their seats and made their way out. As they walked some distance from the meeting room, they complained, Wasn't the chairman the one who signed the contract with Joseph? Why is he angry with us? It seems the archaeology team will have to work through the night now. At this moment, Jerry Cooper, following behind and wiping sweat from his forehead, thought, We are being very reckless. Suddenly, a voice interrupted his thoughts. Is the meeting over? Jerry Cooper looked up in surprise to see Odigon standing there. Odigon, you. Odigon approached and whispered, Why are you here? What if you get caught? Odigon replied irritably, Don't worry, do you think anyone can see my invisibility cloak? If you're so worried, just let me go. How long must I protect you? I know my master gave the order, but it has been many days, Jerry Cooper said, grabbing Odigon's arm. You can't leave. Who knows when the traitor, Constellation, will come to assassinate me. Indeed, Odigon had been appointed as Jerry Cooper's bodyguard. The betrayer carried a poisoned dagger. Odigon, who always wanted to follow Choi Yeonseung and constantly complained, had never imagined not following his master's orders. He continued to plead, saying that if necessary, he would steal and give you all the company's secrets, so don't abandon me. Seeing this, Odigon reluctantly replied, All right, I get it, move aside. Odigon sighed inwardly, thinking that he should have been fighting alongside his master. Wondering what to do with this old man now, the master was probably doing something extraordinary, right? On the other side, Choi Yeonseung was slowly enjoying a cup of tea. Dragon Wong spoke up at this point, So, what you're saying is that all the loud talk in front of the CEO was just a bunch of nonsense? He replied, Not exactly, it's more like I told them about my ambitions in aiming for the top position. Dragon Wong responded, I haven't made any plans yet. What exactly was that nonsense? This scoundrel, well, thank you, we've made them more agitated, and since we have Nguyen Bao, hasn't everything gone according to plan? I'm sure you have something in mind, so this time I'll respect you, do whatever you need to do. Choi Yeonseung replied casually, Okay. At this point, he thought to himself, if things don't work out, he'll give up. He's only thought this far. It's not like I don't have any weapons. They will be useful at some point, right? Thinking that, he continued, besides, there must be many hunters going into the abyss. Yes. The abyss is a land of opportunity for hunters. They can't just come and go freely from dungeons like that. Well, it's normal for people to go in there. They go in to increase their stats, but in the end, they get stuck and die in there.